Welcome in SEC baseball fans. Alex, we made it. We're through the regular season. It's Hoover time. We're going to go through all the SEC series from last weekend, break down upcoming Hoover predictions, as well as kind of walk through what every team needs on the bubble. And then lastly, we'll go over kind of the awards. Alex, let's go ahead and start with your team, LSU Tigers. Took 2 of 3 from Georgia, had a chance to sweep on Saturday. LSU, that Saturday game, a lot of bullpen issues kind of came through. Christian Little had some of the walks. UGA kind of took advantage. They're pretty much out, but they locked in Hoover for them. Walk us through what you saw from that LSU team.
Yeah, Thursday and Friday were basically perfect. They worked out absolutely perfectly. Now, Friday was a little bit of a hiccup with the extra inning, or sorry, Thursday, game one. With Thatcher Hurd coming in, giving up the lead. Georgia tying the game, and then in the ninth, but man, he settled back in, gave you 5 innings. The game ends up going 12 innings. Thatcher Hurd gave you 5, and you won the ball game. And then Friday, Ty Floyd goes 7 innings and shoves. Gavin Guidry comes in, slams the door. You got 2 wins. You're good to go. That's the kind of formula that if they can repeat that, come postseason, that's the kind of formula that gets you to Omaha.
The one question I do have with LSU is they're kind of starting to tinker with their lineup with some of the corner outfield spots. Gavin Dugas, obviously, I think he's been a little nicked up, and then the catchers they kind of swap in and out. So that one's kind of a little bit weird for a team that's as hot as they are and in the top 5 to kind of still be having some of those lineup issues. And then for Georgia, they feel squarely out, right? 11-19, losers of 4 of 6. They have to basically win the SEC to steal a bid.
Yeah. If they want to get in, they have to win the SEC tournament. And I mean, that's going to be a tall task, especially with their limited pitching.
Moving on, Tennessee took 2 of 3 over USC. Tennessee had strong outings for starting pitching. South Carolina kind of more of the same. Losers of 5 of their last 6 SEC series losses. Tennessee was kind of their first really true road win, 4-12 on the road. Sit at 16-14 overall. How'd you kind of feel about this Tennessee series, Alex?
It really surprised me. I really thought the Gamecocks were going to come out and Tennessee was just going to struggle like they have on the road all year. I mean, like you said, 4-12 on the road. That's awful road record. And so I thought that the South Carolina bats were going to get it done. But, man, Andrew Lindsay really came out and gave him the complete game in game one. And then, really or South Carolina or Tennessee really took care of business in game 2 because they had a double header, right? So they had one game
Yes,
canceled.
so they lost the
2
first one
7-inning
6-0.
double headers, right?
And then Tennessee blew them out there, which is kind of ironic because Tennessee would have run rolled them in the second game regardless. But I was really kind of disappointed with South Carolina's bullpen. I mean, that had kind of been one of the strengths of their team. And Tennessee is not really known as a team. I know last year they banged the ball around, but that's not really been their MO this year. So that one was kind of odd for me. Tennessee, RPI of 16, South Carolina with an RPI of 6. It feels like we're going to be talking about 5 SEC teams with 3 spots to host. How do you feel as a Tennessee fan about them being hosts?
I'm not comfortable with Tennessee being, I mean,
Mm.
they're going to need to make some noise in Hoover to really solidify that host spot. I mean, I think they've got a good shot. They're in a pretty good spot, but they're going to need probably a couple wins at least in Hoover.
And then South Carolina, I mean, this is just crazy that we're talking about them being hosts from where we were 6 weeks ago, and they've lost 5 of 6 in the SEC. And they really have kind of fallen off a cliff and need to kind of get right quick. And again, the SEC tournament is not really the time to figure that one out.
Yeah, it's hard. I think South Carolina is kind of on the bubble for that for a top 8. I don't think they're a lock for their top 8, but they've got a shot. They're another one. They've got to make some noise in Hoover. They better not get bounced, by Georgia in the first game.
So them and Kentucky, I think, are my 2 legitimate gripes against the RPI because South Carolina has just been sliding, and they have an RPI at 6. Like it doesn't punish them at all for losing at all. That's been my biggest gripe. And then moving on, Florida 2 of 3 over Kentucky. Florida feels like they're kind of a backdoor shot into be number 1 overall. Likely 2 or 3 could see them falling down at 4. Kentucky sitting at 16 and 14, but losers of 6 of their last SEC series. So that one will be interesting to see kind of how the committee handles Kentucky because they might be the quote unquote northern team to host.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's like you said, Kentucky's RPI is just so high, and that's really a credit to them and their non-conference scheduling. The series win they had at Indiana State early in the season, um, and against Elon has really helped their RPI a lot. And I think Kentucky's going to host. I mean, I can't really envision a scenario where they don't host. They're not a top 8 seed. They're absolutely not a top 8 seed. But I can't. It's hard to imagine them not hosting, even with the struggles they've had lately. And yeah, Florida is probably going to be in that 2 or 3 seed mix, I think.
Yeah, and Florida, that one will be really interesting to see where they fall with them, LSU, and Arkansas, because they really kind of have very similar resumes. They have big flaws that I think are in past years would have had them knocked down. They have some bad series loss, but at the same time, they have some really tremendous SEC wins. And again, it's very fitting that all three of these teams tied for the SEC crown. I think Florida was a half game back, but I mean, at that point, I think you almost want to give it the tie.
Yeah, I think officially Arkansas and Florida, because they didn't play each other, tied, and they're co-SEC regular season champs, which is kind of amazing because there was a very specific set of a very specific set of circumstances that had to happen that last weekend for Florida to win the SEC, and it all fell in line for them.
If you're scouting this Florida team, how do you go about beating them? Because they have kind of the front end starters. Caglione can give you some depth as a number 3. And again, they really bang the ball around the yard. Caglione again behind the plate, Rivera, and then BT Ripple. I know he's kind of had a down year, but he's still an experienced bat in that lineup. What's kind of their weakness, you think?
I think it's got to be their bullpen. I know we're going to say this a lot about a lot of teams outside of like Wake Forest, but their starting pitching is really good. It's not quite Wake Forest or even LSU with their first 2 starters, but Brandon Sprode and Hurston Waldrop are really good 1-2 punch, and then Jack Caglione, he's been kind of hit and miss. He's been hot and cold. And their bullpen especially has been hot and cold. I mean, I know Neely's got 10, 11 saves on the year. But outside of
Yeah,
that,
I mean, their
they've had some issues.
bridge, their 5, 6, 7, 8 innings for them. I mean, Neely isn't going to go out and throw 7 innings in a weekend. So again, I think that their biggest flaw is and we saw it with the A&M with Florida, if they can get to the starter early and you can get into that Florida bullpen and make them use Neely. Outside of that, they really don't have a lot. And I know Jay Johnson talked about it in his press conference with kind of moving around Todd Floyd to just find outs. That one will be interesting to see how Florida kind of attacks that as well because again, they have 4 guys and they have depth. It's just unfortunately all of their guys are starters. They don't really have any of that mid relief kind of work.
Yeah, I think it's a similar issue to kind of LSU, where LSU's really late in the season's established a closer with Thatcher Hurd. He's really established himself, I think, as the closer. But yeah, the middle relief and setup is kind of their issue.
Yeah, I mean, you really don't trust Christian Little in those situations, especially the way he's kind of walked people at times and let people back in. Blake Money is obviously not what he was at the beginning of last year. That one will be exciting to see kind of how those 2 teams handle their bullpens. Because again, the way that their lineups are set up, if the bullpens hold them to 7 runs, they're in the ballgame to win them. But moving on to kind of the surprise team, Auburn swept Missouri. Auburn 17 and 13, 12 and 3 in their last 15. I mean, I think Auburn has just about as good of an argument as anybody to be a host. They really feel like a lock, which is not something I thought I would say 3-4 weeks ago from Auburn. I mean, that was a disappointing loss for LSU and South Carolina a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn has really come on. They use that South Carolina series win as really a springboard for them. They're certain. I don't know that they're a lock. Their RPI is kind of their issue for hosting. It's a little lower than say like Alabama's, and Alabama's got pretty similar resume otherwise. So, that'll be interesting to see what the committee does there because I don't think Alabama and Auburn both host. I think you're going to get one of those two.
Yeah, that one will be kind of odd to see, but again, I know that when A&M played Auburn, and I really kind of dove deep into that one, it really didn't seem like Auburn had the pitching depth to compete at the SEC. I thought that they were kind of go about the way of Georgia, but again, I mean, these are the scores in their last series, which again, take them with a grain of salt. It's Ole Miss, it's Missouri, 4 runs, 2 runs, 5 runs, 0 runs, 2 runs, and then Saturday they had 7. They will take on Missouri again, so it'll be the fourth time they see Missouri in a very, very short time. Do you think that that plays into Missouri, or do you think that that kind of plays into Auburn?
Honestly, I'm not sure it really helps either one. I guess maybe if it helps one more than the other, I would say Auburn because typically if you're seeing, if you're seeing pitchers more, that's where the advantage comes in.
Mhm.
And Auburn has better hitters than Missouri does. So I would say the advantage would go to Auburn for that.
And then I guess that's a great segue into the next part. When you talked about Alabama, Alabama swept the carcass of Ole Miss, have an RPI of 12, sit at 38 and 17, 16 and 14 in the SEC. Ole Miss swept out, defending champs are sitting at home for the second straight year. I'm gonna be honest, I did not see this one coming. I thought Ole Miss had a little bit better bats than Mississippi State had last year, and that they would kind of sneak in. But I mean, the last like 3 weeks for Ole Miss have just been like a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it really like from the outside looking in, it really looks like that team gave up.
Mhm.
That they just quit. I mean, 6-24 in the SEC. I mean, that's just not it's just not acceptable at a program like Ole Miss, especially coming off a national championship. I mean, I know they had a lot of injuries, especially on the pitching staff. The Hunter Elliott one really hurt, but we've seen a lot of pitching staffs in the SEC deal with a bunch of injuries. At Arkansas, LSU, South Carolina. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, those teams have found a way, and Ole Miss just they just couldn't. I mean, I knew they would take a step back, but I didn't think they would be this bad.
Again, they had Georgia, Missouri, Auburn, Alabama, which again, I know that at the beginning of the season that was going to be the easy part of their schedule, and Alabama and Auburn kind of played up. But again, if you're Mike Bianco and you can't beat those 4 teams to get into Hoover, like you really have to start asking questions about who you are as a team there. And then for Alabama, I mean, their fifth straight win. They were kind of on that teetering bubble with A&M 2 weeks ago. They run rolled A&M both times on Saturday and Sunday, and then run rolled Ole Miss as well. That one will be a tough, tough argument between them and Auburn. They do hold the tiebreaker over Auburn going 2 of 3, but they have a little bit better record, and I think that they're going to be the host. But again, Auburn has been so hot, and we have seen the SEC kind of give treatment to the hot teams, or not the SEC, the NCAA.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what they do. I don't know which way. I don't have a good feel for which way they would go on that, but it'll be an interesting test case. I mean, we have seen that the committee a lot of times just kind of blindly follow RPI, and so that's why I kind of feel like Alabama might have the slight edge because Alabama's at 12 in the RPI, Auburn's at
Mm.
17. Um, you know, that may be what separates them. But Auburn has one more SEC win than Alabama, so it's just it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I am glad I don't have to make the decision between Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee because all 4 of them have very similar resumes, and you can make cases for every single one. Um, and then another case for someone who I think kind of saved their hosting. Vanderbilt took 2 of 3 from Arkansas, ended a 4-game skid to take the last 2 from Arkansas. And again, Arkansas had leads in both those games. The strength of this Hogs team has been the bullpen, and the bullpen's kind of what let them down here. So that one will be kind of intriguing to see how Arkansas kind of handles their bullpen was from last week. Is it kind of more of an anomaly, or do you think it's kind of a sign of the times for Arkansas?
I don't know. I mean, Vanderbilt's a really good team there, and it was in Nashville. I mean, you look at the home and road splits for
Mhm.
SEC teams this year, and the home team is just far and away, the favorite. So I wouldn't read too much into it for Arkansas. I mean, I think the one concern I would have would be Hagen Smith and how he's doing. Making sure they're not overusing him because they've used him. He's been their jack of all trades this year where, I mean, he's started, closed, middle relief, whatever they need for him, he's been there. So that would be my only concern. And it's not even that big of a concern. Um, I think this Auburn team is primed to make a run to Omaha again.
Yeah, I almost want to say Arkansas lost this one on purpose because they kind of felt like if they won this series, they would have backdoored into the number 1 seed. And I know that Arkansas fans will never say that, but that really did kind of feel what it was like. And again, for Vandy, I think Vandy kind of saved their hosting spot. They'd been falling the wrong way, lost 2 of 3 at Alabama, swept at Florida last weekend, and then if they would have lost this series, but again, RPI of 8, I think that they're a step below that kind of trio of Arkansas, LSU, and God, it's slipping my mind
Florida.
right now. Florida. But I think that they are going to be the conversation that they're going to have is between them and Clemson. I think that that's going to be the two with theirs. Do they do 4 SEC teams or 3 ACC teams? Because that one will be really kind of the only argument that they have, and we'll kind of walk through that later in the week, especially as I kind of get these last exclamation points. We'll go ahead and wrap up with the last series, the 2 Maroon teams. Texas A&M took 2 of 3 from Mississippi State. Texas A&M had lost 3 straight before winning the last 2. Jace Lavalette, the freshman, had 3 home runs, had every single RBI, including a 3-run bomb in the ninth to kind of save the A&M season. I did see it from Ryan Baumgartner with Kendall Rogers that he had texted that A&M feels squarely in, but at the same time, I really don't feel very comfortable about Texas A&M being in the field. Their resume leaves a ton to be desired.
I think A&M. Yeah, I don't know that I would. I don't know. I agree that they're squarely in. I think a couple wins in Hoover are going to go a long way. That series was interesting because it was both Mississippi State and Texas A&M fighting for their tournament lives. Texas A&M, the RPI of 34 is not. That's not great. The
Yeah,
conference
but the
record.
weird thing though about that is they've kind of in the past given preferential treatment to quote unquote disappointing teams that figure it out down the stretch. I mean, they took 2 of 3 from Florida, 2 of 3 from Mississippi State, 2 of 3 from Kentucky, 2 of 3 from Auburn. So they have the highest of highs, but again, they got swept by Tennessee, they got swept by Arkansas, they lost 2 of 3 to Alabama down the stretch. They have probably the worst loss in the SEC, the LeBar loss, and then 2 of 3 at Portland. So it's a
How many
like a,
SEC wins do they have?
they sit at 14 and 16.
14. So I think the percentages say at 14 wins, I think 75% of SEC teams get into the tournament at 14 wins.
Mm-hmm.
So they got a good shot. They're in a pretty good spot, but the RPI is a little bit lower than you would want to feel comfortable.
Let me read. I'll pull up the Ryan tweet that he did just so I can walk through it and just quote it so I'm not misquoting it. It was I cannot find it, but I'll go ahead and link it kind of in the pre-show. But again, Kendall was saying that they feel squarely in, which I think he's very plugged in. But for Mississippi State, this is now the second straight year that they have missed Hoover. This is now the second straight year that they have had pitching troubles. This is now the second straight year they've had all SEC honors at bats. And again, they miss Hoover again. How hot is the Lamona's hot seat? I know he won a national championship 2 years ago, but I think that this is about the only way you do get fired is missing Hoover twice. I mean, we'll have to go back a long, long time. I can't remember the last time Mississippi State missed Hoover twice.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look back at that, but I got to think that they're going to give him one more year. They'll give him another shot to hire a new pitching coach. Somebody else brought up that he's got like a $5 million buyout, which for a baseball coach is a big buyout. So, it just depends on how badly the movers and shakers at state want him out. So I
They
gotta feel
do
like they're
have a
going to
new
give him one
athletic
more.
director, though. That one is worth mentioning that they do have a new athletic director. 9 and 21 this year in the SEC. ironically 9-21 in the SEC last year. And again, Lamonis kind of got dealt a pretty good hand when he got the job at Mississippi State. I mean, he had a ton of veteran experience, and we've seen it kind of with his guys that they like to dig themselves holes and then it being too little too late to get out of it. Again, they won a series at LSU, but they went, I think they had 2 6 or 7 game losing streaks. So their sandwiches were just absolutely terrible. And in a ton of those early season ones, they didn't even look competitive. South Carolina was their first one to break their SEC streak at 7, wins over Alabama, who's likely in the tournament, and then the LSU one, which I don't know what to make of this Mississippi State team. Part of me wants to think if they would have got into Hoover, they would have done a little damage just based on that LSU series. But then at the same time, their pitching was just so horrible at times.
Yeah, I mean the thing with the SEC tournament, I mean the Mississippi State strength is their bats. They have some legit dudes in that lineup, but the Hoover Met plays is it's a big ballpark, and so it's a little bit harder to bang the ball around in that ballpark. So they may have had some struggles there.
Yeah, and I think that we'll go ahead and get into the tournament show, but I mean, there's a ton of SEC teams that love to kind of bang the ball around, and there's really not a lot of pitching depth. So here is the bracket. I'll go ahead and get one up on my side as well. But walk through this, Alex. Who do you think comes out of this? Who do you think kind of goes by the wayside? Who goes one and out? Which one of those 4 teams go 2 and out? I guess we'll just go pick by pick. South Carolina, Georgia, who you got there?
That's a tough one. I mean, South Carolina, they both just came off of emotional series. Both came off series losses. I think Georgia's pitching might be in a better situation than South Carolina's just because with all the injuries that South Carolina's had. And Georgia right now probably has a better lineup than South Carolina. And I can't believe I'm saying that considering where South Carolina's lineup was the middle of the year. But man, they have really fallen off. So I think I'm going to take Georgia in that game.
I'm going to go South Carolina. I'm going to not try and complicate this. Every part of me wants to pick Georgia. But again, South Carolina swept Georgia at the beginning of the year. Georgia, I know they have Charlie Condom, as Kendall likes to call him. But I just think it's the South Carolina, just their depth. And they have to get into the double elimination side in order for them to host. I mean, they remind me a ton of Texas A&M from last year. I think that they need to get into there. And then next one, Texas A&M, Tennessee. Tennessee again swept Texas A&M at the beginning of the year when A&M was 1-5. Highest of highs and lowest of lows for both of these teams. Who do you like coming out of this one?
I think I like Tennessee. I think I like their pitching depth better than Texas A&M. I think their lineups are probably about equal. Texas A&M might have a slight edge in the lineup. Lavalette has really come on here, towards the end of the season. But so has Tennessee's lineup has really found their stride here the second half of the season. So give me the Vols.
I was going to go with the Vols again. A&M is a very, very heavily reliant team on the home run as well as the walk. It seems like a lot of their big innings kind of start from walks. So they do kind of make you earn it. I think if they can get through this Tennessee one, they're going to go very, very deep. But this is just a very, very tough matchup. And I think Tennessee, with their pitching and their depth for pound in the zone, I think that I like Tennessee this one. So we're going both favorites to start it out. Alabama, Kentucky. Alabama is the 9 seed. Kentucky is the 8 seed. Who do you like in this one?
This is a hard one to pick, man. Alabama quietly has the best ERA in the SEC, which if you'd told me that at the beginning of the season, I told you were crazy. But Kentucky is a really scrappy team. They have a different brand of baseball, but they stick to it and they love it. Kentucky is they're a little bit of a spark plug. They like to mouth off a lot. I wouldn't expect that from a Kentucky team, but man, they're always seem to be getting into it with whatever team they're playing, and even sometimes the umpires. But man, this is a hard one to pick. I think I think I'm going to go Alabama, but I don't feel good about it.
I was going to go Alabama simply because, I mean, this was a very, very competitive series earlier in the year, and Kentucky took 2 of 3. Alabama was in all 3 of those games. And I like the Crimson Tide. I know that they were so close in that 2 of 3 series, and they feel like a completely different team here. I'm going to go with the Tide again. And then lastly, Missouri Auburn. Missouri, a rare appearance in Hoover. They miss Hoover more times than any other team in the SEC. Have never made the NCAA tournament as an SEC team. And then Auburn at 5, 17 and 13, a true surprise coming out of nowhere. Who do you got in this one?
I mean, it's Auburn.
Yeah,
They're
Auburn.
they're they're just they're the more complete team. They're the better team. They should win this game.
Yeah, and I mean, if this would have been Missouri without all the injuries that we'd seen, and after that first weekend at Tennessee, I would have liked Missouri here. But I would be really interested to see how Missouri kind of goes about because 30 and 23, 10 and 20 in the SEC, they were a lot higher at the beginning of the year, especially after that first SEC series. And it almost feels like a disappointment to be at 12. Um,
For sure.
so we got LSU, and then did you pick Georgia?
I picked Georgia.
So who you got in that
Uh,
one?
so in that one, I'm going to go LSU. Um, Actually, no, I'm take that back. I'm thinking about it a little bit more. I'm going to take Georgia in that one
Georgia.
because I think LSU is going to throw. I don't know who they're going to start. Probably maybe Blake Money. Maybe um, some people are saying Thatcher Hurd, but I would not. I would not like them to start Thatcher Hurd. I want to keep Thatcher Hurd at the back of the pen, but maybe Griffin Herring or somebody like that. I think they're going to treat it like a midweek game, and Georgia's they're going to want to fight. And LSU's not gonna. They're not throwing all their big bullets, right now. So I think I would take Georgia in that game.
And I'm going to take South Carolina in that one too as well. I think we'll get to see the game 3 that we all wanted to see in Columbia. And again, I think LSU, it's not that they don't care about this game, but Skeens isn't going to throw this game, I don't feel
Right.
like, which I feel like
No.
that's really the only game LSU is going to win in this tournament is the game that they throw Skeens. And again, they could very easily only throw him 5 innings as well. I mean, they're not going to ruin their bullpen to try and get this. Um, Tennessee, Arkansas both had this one. I like Arkansas on this one. I know that Tennessee swept Arkansas at the beginning of the or in the middle of the year, but I still like the Hogs in this one. I think that they are the better team here. And Tennessee, I think that they only needed to win one. Once they kind of get into this double elimination bracket, they're going to more try and set up their pitching for the regional. And I think Arkansas has the advantage there.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I think that's. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Arkansas too. Yeah, they just seem better prepared for that kind of game.
Florida, Alabama.
Hmm. I think I might go Alabama. Kevin O'Sullivan hasn't, historically like really sold out for the SEC tournament. I don't think he will again. And I think Alabama is just a team playing with their hair on fire right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, Alabama went on a run last year in the SEC tournament and came up a little short. Florida's really never done historically good in this kind of setup. And I really like Alabama. Auburn, Vandy. I like Vandy in this one. I think this one was a little bit easier for me. Tim Corbin, I know that people always like to say he doesn't care about Hoover, but he kind of sneakily wins a game in Hoover. Like he never goes 2 and out. He kind of gets some like amazing start from a freshman reliever that's hasn't thrown any innings all year. I really like Vandy in this one.
So I'm gonna disagree with you there. I like Auburn in that one. Just because I think Auburn wants it more, and Vandy's I think is gonna be Tim Corbin. I think is gonna be more concerned with setting up his pitching than he is about winning this game.
And then this is where it'll kind of get tricky. So we'll just pick the winners out of this one. Um, Georgia, Arkansas. I had South Carolina, Arkansas. Who do you like here?
Uh, I would go with Arkansas over either one of those teams.
I was going to go with Arkansas as well. I think that they are set up to go the best. I mean, they have the most pitching depth. I think that they're one of the deeper teams. And then Alabama, you had Auburn, I had Vandy. Who do you kind of like in that one?
If it's Alabama Vandy, or if it's wait, which one did we say again? I got confused.
Sorry, I picked Vandy. Vandy, Florida is mine, and then you have Florida, Auburn.
Okay. Then I'm gonna take um. I would take Auburn over Florida.
And then I'm going to take the Vandy boys there. And then who you got winning the whole SEC tournament?
I think Arkansas. I
Arkansas?
think I think it ends up being Arkansas and actually Alabama in the final, and I like Arkansas in that.
I was going to say, I think my final between them, which I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit, I think the winner of Alabama, Kentucky, and the winner of Tennessee A&M, that's going to be the final. Which is a very, very completely out of left field kind of scenario. But I like both those teams. I mean, all four of those teams went on very deep runs last year. Everybody but Tennessee came up short even before getting to the championship game. I like all four of those teams in the SEC because again, LSU, Arkansas, Florida, Vandy, they're not gonna expend their pitching staffs or kind of came with some fire that I think Tennessee, South Carolina, and kind of these second tier SEC teams will kind of play with.
Yeah, I think those four teams you mentioned specifically, they're going to be the one. They're the ones that have the most to gain from deep runs in Hoover, and so I think they're going to come out with the most energy.
Running out of time here, we'll do a quick bubble recap. 14 SEC teams, 12 are in Hoover. How many SEC teams make the NCAA tournament?
I think 10.
10.
Yeah, so I think in this scenario, well, if Georgia loses the first game, then they're definitely not making the tournament. Missouri's not making the tournament. Texas A&M could make the tournament, but they would
Here's
need
the thing
a
that's
deep
weird
run.
about them is they're kind of a little bit fortunate, and I didn't even think about this. Tennessee's not a bad loss. Arkansas is not a bad loss. Like they don't have to play Georgia or Missouri or even some of these other teams that are around them. I mean, those are two very, very talented teams that'll likely boost their RPI despite them losing with the way the RPI is set up. It's a smaller percentage of Portland and Lamar when they play Tennessee and Arkansas.
Yeah, and the neutral site thing helps with the RPI too. But we'll see. I think if they beat Tennessee, I think Texas A&M gets in. They lose to Tennessee, I don't think they get in.
And then everybody else, I think, is basically virtual locks. It's kind of weird how there's really not any quote unquote bubble teams in the SEC, but there's a ton of like regional bubbles and a ton of super regional bubble teams as well. How many SEC teams do you think are super regional hosts?
I think 4. I
4.
think the top 4, LSU, Arkansas, Florida, and Vandy, I think they're all going to be top 4.
What's your order for them? So obviously Wake is number 1. Who's your 2, 3, 4?
So 2, I would go Arkansas, 3, Florida, 4, LSU, and then Vandy probably 6 or 7.
I was going to say, it wouldn't surprise me if they put Stanford as a 4 just to kind of break up some of these SEC teams. But again, I don't want to go to any of those regionals if I'm a baseball fan. Like those are going to be the toughest regionals, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, Alex, I think that's all we have time for. Be sure to follow the Twitter, the Weekend Rotation, as well as College Baseball Central. We're going to be doing daily recaps of the SEC, as well as kind of doing a live bubble tracker on the website. So we'll provide links to that. Alex and I will be back on Monday, breaking down the tournament in a more, I guess, controlled aspect. We won't get to speculate anymore. But once again, thanks everybody for joining in. This has been Jake McKeever and Alex Day with the Weekend Rotation. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the